Hello, and welcome back to Sales and Business Growth for Busy Entrepreneurs. I'm your resident sales and business nerd, Lindsay Fletcher, and this podcast is the place for small business owners to learn sales skills, business growth strategies, and how to squeeze more out of your day. If you haven't already, please hit the follow button on this podcast wherever you are listening so that you don't miss an episode. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that I've launched a free tool on my website that you can download that we have used to figure out which sales and marketing activities actually create revenue in our businesses. It's called My Sales Growth Tracker, and it's now available for download on my website. So go to lindsayfletcher.co/free-resources. Click on Sales Growth Tracker and drop your email, and I will send that over to you immediately, along with steps on how to use it. It has literally been the tool we have used to figure out what works and what doesn't so that we can stop wasting our time on the activities that don't, and we can continue to do more of the activities that work. So again, go to lindsayfletcher.co/free-resources and click on Sales Growth Tracker. Oh, and one more thing before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we are just a few downloads away from hitting the 4,000 download mark, and that's a big milestone for me. So thank you for listening. I appreciate that you are here along with me for this journey, and I hope you learned some really great tips and tricks from this show. Okay, let's dive into today's episode because I'm really excited about this. I am going to be featuring some listener questions. Now listen, if you want to be a part of these episodes, shoot me an email at hello@lindsayfletcher.co, or you can leave me a voicemail like Felisha did. I will play that here in just a second. You can leave me a voicemail at speakpipe.com/Lindsay Fletcher. Again, that's speakpipe.com/Lindsay Fletcher. I'll put that in the show notes. You can click on that, leave me a voicemail with whatever question that you have about sales, business growth, or time management, and you might just get featured on the podcast. Okay, so here we go. Here is Felisha's question for today.
Hi, Lindsay. This is Felisha Hennessy. My question to you is, what would be the best way to approach a cold call in today's environment, specific to, let's say, real estate?
Hey, Felisha. So this is a really great question because this is something that most business owners and salespeople alike avoid like the plague in small business and in large businesses, because warm leads, even if they are only lukewarm, are so much easier than cold leads. So I'll give you my best advice here. Rather than treating cold calls like sales calls, personally, I would treat cold calls more like market research calls. So I would go into these conversations with as much curiosity as I can so that I can learn as much about this person or family in the short amount of time that I might be able to talk to them. I'd have a list of questions prepared before I even pick up the phone or knock on their door. And I would also try to identify their buying style while I'm talking to them so that if it gets far enough along that I can actually pitch myself, then I'll know a little bit more about them and I'll know a little bit about how to discuss what I could do for them. So you mentioned real estate in your message. So I'll use the example of cold calling like a for sale by owner type of property. So I'd want to learn as much as possible about why they decided to list their home or their property on their own. I'd want to understand their circumstances, their situations, what led them to putting the property or home on the market, why they're doing it by themselves and not with a real estate agent, what they're expecting to get out of the property, etc. So you just want to ask all of the real estate questions that you can, more from a market research perspective rather than a, hey, I'm going to try to sell you on my thing, so I'm just engaging you in conversation. Things like how much interest they've had, how many showings, how are they marketing the property, and how long they plan to keep it for sale by owner, and if a real estate agent might be on the horizon for them if it gets to that point. I would use the conversation more as an info gathering session and help them as much as you can throughout that phone call if that feels right in the conversation. So I don't mean like market the property for them because you aren't getting paid to do that, but help them identify gaps in their knowledge about the market. Maybe why they aren't getting traction, why they should use a real estate agent. Maybe it's because of the new crazy processes that y'all are having to go through now just to show a property. And again, this is just me. This is how I would approach a cold calling type of situation. But I would just really emphasize the information gathering and the getting to know them process rather than going or trying to push them towards talking about yourself. I would use it as a market research type of conversation. And then if the conversation gets there and the time comes, I'd ask if you can share some things about yourself, how you market properties, the housing market data in your area, and what all of that information means to them. And again, in their buying style, if you can start to identify it. Now, if you're doing in-person cold calls, meaning you're knocking on doors or you're going into businesses or whatever this looks like, I'd approach it very similarly, like a market research call. These should be a little bit easier on you because you're face-to-face and they will get to know you faster. You can visually show your interest and sincerity in learning about them and their situations and their circumstances. And I just think it's better to open up lines of communication than to hard sell your services right out of the gate, especially if they didn't come to you. So learn about them, show a genuine interest in helping them, and see where that takes you in the conversation. And then look, not all cold calls are going to end up with you signing them. So if nothing else, you have gained some market research and it will give you marketing content to use. Again, I think that it's important for us to ask a lot of questions and learn before we start to sell because we might be selling prematurely. We might be selling something that they actually don't need. So again, this is how I would approach this cold calling type of situation, whether it is cold emails, cold phone calls, or cold in-person drop-ins. That's how I would approach the cold calling situation. So thank you, Felisha, so much for submitting your question. And again, to all of you out there, if you have a sales skills, business growth, or time management question about small business or about entrepreneurship, I'm happy to answer. You can send me an email at hello@lindsayfletcher.co, or even better, you can leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/Lindsay Fletcher. And I'll leave that in the show notes so you can just click on that right from your phone, wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the podcast. I am so honored that you are along this ride with me, and I hope that you find this information and this podcast helpful. As always, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for your business, and I will talk to you next time.